Hey, everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. I am thrilled to have Stacey Swinehart Ganderson on. She is this incredible talent in digital accessibility, and she's going to talk to us a little bit today about the intersection of culture and inclusivity and why maybe those inclusivity goals that you set for yourselves a year or two ago aren't quite going the way that you want, and maybe how culture is actually getting in the way of inclusivity of both employees and your customers in the product. So welcome, Stacey. Thank you for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
Josh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here talking with you today and with all the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were most recently head of foundational design at Realtor.com.
Yes.
What does that mean? How did you get here? Tell us a little bit about kind of this journey and how you have this kind of very particular niche and expertise.
Sure. So, it's a long non-linear journey through design, starting from, print, because when I graduated, there were no.
Me too. Yeah, so I get it.
Yeah, no jobs. Yeah. And then during my time working at PayPal, I got very interested and partnered closely with the accessibility team there. Eventually became accessibility liaison for the design department. And then when I moved to Austin, same thing, accessibility liaison, and continued forth with that interest at USAA. And then finally, when I moved to Realtor.com, I was initially brought on to build their net new inclusive design accessibility team, which then grew into let's have foundational design, which was inclusive design, accessibility, design systems, and content design. So at Realtor, I was in charge of, honestly, I guess, spearheading and heading their accessibility transformation for the digital products.
Mm-hmm. Can you just, so we can level set, what does it mean? Like, what is digital? How would you define digital accessibility?
So digital accessibility, it's anything, anything digital. So think of the web, the internet, right? Mobile apps, tablets. It can go further than that, but my work, like with the W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, is focused more on like the digital aspect rather than like physical spaces, like ramps, making sure that you have elevators in buildings, you have doors that can self-open or open with an easy wave of a body part or a button or something like that. So yeah.
So what you're just describing, there's like kind of accessibility in the physical world. So this is accessibility in the digital world. I think of there's this accessibility settings on my iPhone of, like voice read over, if perhaps, or like increased contrast. So there's kind of those, is that what we're thinking about when you're working with these companies?
Yes. And that can also, for accessibility, also include like things like captions or subtitles. Like when you think of like Hulu or Netflix, they use the wrong term. They call everything subtitles, but they're actually, there's subtitles and captions are two different things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If you are someone that, is deaf and relies on them to understand the media, you definitely know what I'm talking about here when they're two different things. So
what is very quickly, what's the
Sure. So
I'm interested. I didn't realize.
Yeah. So captions, this is also describing what's happening on the screen. So you might be like, something dings, there's a noise, someone knocks on the door, there's music playing in the background, and it's talking in sync with what's happening on the screen. Subtitles is more like localization, where you're talking about, I want to watch something in another language, and I want to make sure I'm having an equivalent experience to what's happening here. So you might say, for example, let's say I'm watching an anime and you want to watch it in Japanese, but you don't understand Japanese. So you're going to put the subtitles on to understand what's happening, but you don't need the captions with like, oh, there was a loud noise, because you're like, no, I do hear the loud noise. I know what's happening.
Yeah. Right. I saw there's sort of that meme, the brackets that say screaming internally is kind of that's what I think of, where you're like describing like large bang or whatever that is. All right, so let's get to it. So I'm really interested in understanding why it is that a culture might be preventing an organization from actually being more inclusive. There's all these noble goals. Great. We now have this awareness that we need to be, you either have your DEI or your JEDI or whatever it might be. Really, we're talking about inclusivity, more people. So there's the more people bringing in, enabling people to do better work internally as employees and or creating a product that is more inclusive. When did you realize that culture was something that could and probably is most likely getting in the way of these kinds of efforts for organizations?
I feel like there was always a little thing in the back of my mind that something was up. And
Yeah.
then, working in inclusive design accessibility specifically at my last role, I think it really came to light, like all like the light bulbs went off when you realize, you're trying to, build in accessibility into your products, and everyone's like, oh, we want to bake it in to how, so we don't have to like retrofit at the end, which is more expensive. And then you realize there are no objective or key results, the OKRs, that have any sort of requirements around accessibility. There aren't any initiatives in the company. And I'm saying this company in particular, I mean, like most companies don't really think about this.
Yeah, broadly speaking.
Yeah, broadly speaking. There's not a company-wide initiative to actually prioritize us to make anyone say, oh, let's do this. Let's put some numbers to this. Let's invest in it. Let me make sure that when we build this, it's there versus, oh, let's check a box at the end, right? And the same thing kind of goes towards team culture and how you work together to get there. Because if you can't work together to build the product and make the decisions and have, the experts with the seat at the table to make good decisions to build it accessibly, you're not going to have very good outcomes at the end for your customers either, because it's just, they're tied together, right? So like I look at it as like the internal policies and the governance that are in a company kind of negate the goals that you have at the end for these types of situations.
Well, it just occurs to me, and I don't know, maybe I'm not right, but what you said before, right? Objectives and key results. We're talking about the results, but what you're saying, culture, is how you get to the results. So of course, it's unlikely that your OKRs are going to be about your process, right? You're inherently kind of like flip that. So what can I do, or someone, manager or a leader who's thinking about these things, like where would you even start if you've got, I don't know, you don't even have, you're assuming that they just don't have these ideas in the organization already. They're kind of going about trying to do a new thing in an old way. Maybe did I characterize that correctly?
You did. Like we're all playing by old playbooks.
Yeah. So we need a new playbook. All right,
Stacey, tell us, exactly.
What's in the new playbook here?
Well, so my partner in crime, Rachel Power, who I've worked with for many years, and she was with me at Realtor. We think it actually comes down to accountability. And honestly, I think companies love accountability, even if they're not very good at actually doing it. But so in this instance, we came up with our accountability model where it talked about how we work together to get to the end goal. So you talk about behaviors. You have these behaviors you want to get to, and all these tied up to the core values that the company had. So we made sure they kind of laddered up to everything.
All right, well, that's important. That's something that plays majorly in culture.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So you have behaviors, but to get to your behaviors, you can't just be like, oh, there's behavior change, we're great at it, right? You need actions. You need to create these actions that are the stepping stones to get to those behaviors. So that we created a bunch of actions and leadership actions. So there's two different buckets there.
What's an example of an action? So we know what a value is, right? So give and get respect,
let's say
operate in transparency.
Okay, so let's think of one of the actions that we had. So we're brave. Maybe that is a behavior we have. And so how do we become brave? Maybe there are stepping stones to get there where we like, okay, we speak up and we speak out. That could be brave. But again, that's a spectrum of braveness because everyone's different. And one day you might be feeling pretty brave, another day is not so brave, but what does brave look like to you on that day? And we would provide some like potential examples of what that might be.
Okay.
You know, we'd have quite a few of them. And then we had some other actions like nothing about us without us. So that's an accessibility one where you don't want to design something for somebody with a disability. You want to design someone with, because they're the ones with the lived experience,
Right.
not you, right?
Right.
So,
okay, great. All right,
yeah.
back to the dialogue. All right, so
No, it's all
now
good.
we've got
It's all good.
actions, clarification. Great. So now we've got actions.
Yeah, so we've got behaviors, we've got actions, we had leadership actions which were slightly different because leaders, you know, you have a different role in the company than individual contributors.
Sure.
Acknowledgements and recognition, because you want to have a way to acknowledge your people for doing great work and great things and stepping up.
Yeah, you want to make it visible, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So that other people go, oh, okay, yeah, that's important. Yeah, that's happening, or, you know, they get rewarded for it or whatever it might be.
Exactly. And then at the end of it was actually the legal part of it. And I was like, oh, shouldn't legal go first? I'm like, legal's great, but if you've done all of this, you've satisfied the legal part hopefully, right? So what we then took was this saying, so if you have objectives and key results, you have the OKRs.
Yeah.
Let's put in the actions. So you have objectives, actions, and key results. Now, we didn't coin the OKRs. I saw that from someone else, but how we put them together was us. Like we made it our own. But
the way you connected it.
Yes, how we connected those dots. And so it then becomes like your contract, your working contract, your social agreement with your team. You're starting a project, you're doing your product brief or project brief, whatever it is, and you have a business problem. You're like, great. And as you're going through your stuff, you're like, what is the objective for this thing? What are our actions? How are we promising that we're going to work together to do this thing so that when we get to this key results, like we shook our hands on it, high five, whatever. We are working in this collaborative way, inclusively together, and we've agreed upon it. And that would carry out through your entire project. And so hopefully with these actions that are built with inclusivity in mind for how your team works and accessibility on the end for the user, hopefully these all come together in this beautiful, this wonderful soup of stuff to come out with this end product at the end instead of shoehorning things where they don't need to be.
Well, so we started this by saying accountability. Where does the accountability come in? What did I miss it? Like,
this is the beautiful part of it. It just kind of bakes it in, because so everyone's like, oh, I'm accountable for the work that I do. I'm like, yes, you are. So when you think about
right?
So
that's where I always see that my clients, they're like, yeah, sure, we're accountable. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Like,
I'm so glad we can agree on the idea.
Yeah. So let's say you've got your objective, and you obviously have some key results you're supposed to get there, that you need to get, hit these numbers at the end. And as you're working together, at any point, your team can say, are we doing this thing? Are we actually, talking to users with disabilities? No, let's go do that. And if someone's not doing that, you're not accountable for the thing, how you said you're going to work together to get there.
So by establishing those actions, they are physically, it's not just, hey, we are being inclusive. Like, that's so vague, right? So you've got your behaviors, you've got your actions. And that way we can say, oh, one of the actions that we established as part of this project brief is nothing for us without us. And you're like, okay, great. Let me go check in on that. Am I checking in regularly, like throughout the project, every week during our stand up? Or because like you get lost in the project, I'm sure like I know I do. You're like, here's these aspirations that we established at the beginning. And
let's stick it on the wall and say, look at that. That's great.
Look at that. We did it. Yeah.
No, hopefully, I say this saying a healthy team. Hopefully a healthy team is in fact meeting regularly, talking regularly. It could be virtual, it could be async, but hopefully you're checking in with each other and doing that. And the interesting part is that when you've agreed upon how you're going to work together, it allows people on the team that don't typically have a voice to kind of stand up a little bit more and say, hey, I want to call attention to our action about how we said we were going to do XYZ and we haven't yet. Can we talk about that?
We were going to do this.
Yeah.
And now we're not. So you're giving people the tools to stand up the expectations.
Yeah.
And so what you've done in this process, OAKRs, is created a framework for establishing accountability
Yes.
within this.
Yes.
And so then the flavors of the soup depends on what you're trying to do, but you're saying inclusivity needs to be part of that. And so you're going to actually make sure at the beginning that you're going to be there, or someone with that expertise is going to be there and say, okay, if you're telling me that you want this product or this set of features to be inclusive, then these are the objectives and actions that you need to take to hit these things. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yes. Yes. And then they become part of like the regular working process, so that you have throughout your development life cycle for the product or project that you have. Yeah, and it can just carry through to the end till you deliver. And then next project, you're like, oh, we can choose a different action if we want to. We can try something else and work a different way. Or if I'm a different team, if you've done working agreements with the team, you're always going to shift them all a little bit depending on who's on the team.
Yeah, of course.
And their needs, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to reconsider those team level agreements or project level agreements every time, even if they end up being the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you have? I like to ask about wins or fails, right? That where you've learned something that you can share, right? So we all professionally, I mean, the promise here is candid conversations, right? So we're trying to learn. We're always learning. We should be always learning. Can you articulate either something that that was difficult and went really well and you learned something from, you're like, definitely going to do that next time, or something that actually blew up, didn't work, and you're like, oh, now this is part of my DNA, I'm not going to make that mistake again? Like what, right? Like what can we learn from you? You've already done the hard work. How can, something that we can bring forward that the folks listening to this might learn from?
I think we're gonna take a quick pause here, because when I was thinking about this question, it was in line with more of the ADA stuff.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
Now I have to like resituate back to this topic here.
No, that's fine. You can do the ADA stuff too. That's fine.
Oh, okay. All right. It was like, so because the ADA was very different than the digital accessibility for customers and teams. But let's see. I would say for this for the OAKRs and accountability models and things like that, a lot of times people are too scared to kind of put them into play. They're like, oh, well, I need to go get all these approvals. I need to go do this thing. I'm like, just try it with a team. Try it with 2 teams. Try it with three teams. You don't need to necessarily go through and pilot that. We were going to pilot it. We were like, okay, we have like the crossing the chasm type of style. Like we're going to pilot it, get the early adopters and do this, because we had to go through the whole company. That's hard. And not just like it's too hard. It's just that it's just never going to come to fruition. You just need to find a team, find a friendly team, be like, hey, can we try this thing with you? Let's go do it. And then see how it is. And then use that as the testing ground and just kind of keep iterating on it as you move forward.
Right.
It doesn't need to be like this big whole fancy, oh my God, it has to be perfect before we release it.
I have this established process.
Yeah.
Steps 1, 2, and 3. You're saying just go in. It can only, I think I hear it's can only make it better, right? Like
it's not going to hurt anything.
It's not going to hurt, right?
It's not going to hurt. And I know some people will be like, oh, but won't it take up more time? No, it doesn't take up more time. It should actually, once you get into it, be more efficient and help smooth things on a little bit. And sure, everything you try the first time out is going to be a little bit slower because you're like, oh my God, it's new.
Right.
But, then you have alignment and you have throughout the entire project, then you have agreement. Like anyone can go into a project or meeting and say, this is our objective. This is what we're working on. Here's where we're at. Instead of going to meetings. I was like, what's the objective?
Yeah. Great. Well, that sounds great. It's just like, hey, why don't we just try this out? Why don't we just figure out how to do this to build it in? That is a relievingly simple, maybe not easy, but simple answer to this question that everybody's starting to ask now, where it's like, uh-oh, it's been a little bit. We haven't really figured out how to do this like we said we are going to. So I love that, where you're just saying, let's start by creating those actions that align with those goals, whether it is the inclusivity piece of it, or maybe, you know, more diversity or whatever it might be. You want to build that in to, and that can apply, I think I'm hearing, both the product, but as well as the internal employee process. Is that right?
I would definitely, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of employee processes that companies, I feel, ignore when you think of inclusion and accessibility, and not because they're ignoring, because they necessarily don't want to, like, oh, I don't want to invest in it. It's like, what do I do with this? It's too hard. I don't understand it. Or, you know, what do I do?
Yeah.
So there's something about accessibility that we have some phrases in the field that I really enjoy, where we're like, accessibility is a journey. It's not a one and done thing. You will always be on this accessibility journey for forever, and no one's going to be 100%, you know, correct and accessible all the time. It's impossible. People change, technology changes every day. You can't, it's just the fact of life.
Yeah.
But you just take a step forward, and you take another step forward, and another step forward, and you'll eventually get there. Right.
Mhm.
And by get there, I mean just doing the right thing, making good decisions, you know, creating things that work for as many people as possible. But it obviously is a conscious effort. You have to make the decision to do so, but you can just take one tiny little step, and that's one tiny little step you didn't already have before. And
Right.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to solve it all.
Oh, no.
I feel like while I have you, I need to ask if this working from home and the distributed teams, has that made it, have you observed, in your opinion or your
Mhm.
observations, has it made it made work, and you can take this however you want, made work more inclusive and more accessible, or less inclusive and less accessible? What have been the stumbling blocks that you've observed?
Sometimes it depends on the company or the people at the company. There are definitely some mindsets that are like, you got to be in the office to get work done.
Of
And I'm
course.
like, well,
Yeah.
that's just bunk, in my opinion. But from the accessibility and inclusivity standpoint, it's a great equalizer. So there have been many times in my past where I was the only person on the phone, where everyone else was in a conference room, not because I was working remotely at my house. I was in the company's office, just in another office that wasn't in the same place. And so I'm the only one on the phone, and all of a sudden it gets really quiet, and they get up around the whiteboard. And I'm like, what are you guys doing over there? And they're like, oh, nothing, don't worry about it. I'm like, it must be something. You're all looking at it. Can you send me a photo? Can you do something to help me out? What's
Right.
happening, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you know, pandemic hits. We're all, you know, many of us are working from home. And again, we had this great equalizer where we have the tools we need at our house for the most part. Some of us don't, some of us didn't have to get them. Some of us didn't have the space because, you know, maybe you live in a
Yeah.
small apartment, or you've got
Of
kids,
course.
whatever that looks like. But
Yeah.
I have the power to turn my work situation at home to be something that works for me. And everyone else is also virtually on the call with me. No one's alone off at some whiteboard doing a thing that I can't see, or having conversation on the other end of the conference table that I can't hear,
Yeah.
or having the stupid technology in those rooms zooming in on half of people's faces, and then you
Yeah.
can't see anyone else in the room, right? Or you know, someone's on the chat in the Zoom or the Google Meet, but if you're in the room, you don't see the chat. And so you
Yeah.
don't see that someone's raising their hand and there's a question, right? So when we're all, you know, equally on the same tools, having the same experience, it actually brings you closer together, in my opinion. And then also, if you're somebody that identifies as having a disability, the home environment is in many cases a better setup for you, because again, you've set it up for how it works for you. You don't have a disability tax of trying to get into an office with your wheelchair, right? Or trying to you know, once you're in the office, how do I get up to my space? What if the elevator is broken and I work on the 14th floor? I guess I got to go home, right? those types of things.
Yeah.
So not to say that working from home is the only answer. I just prefer, in my opinion, companies should look at flexibility, inherent flexibility, support their employees, because employees are the biggest asset a company has. You want to be successful, you want to make money, awesome. I like being paid. I like making money myself. I'm not working out of the goodness of my heart. You're not paying me out of the goodness of your heart. This is fine. It can be transactional.
Right.
But you should want me to be set up for success so that I in turn can then be successful for you.
Exactly.
Like it is a two-way street here. So if I'm not successful, you're not going to be successful. And then let's say, you have to let me go for whatever reason. And then you're like, oh, I want to rehire. The overhead in hiring a new employee is high. I already had the knowledge that you needed. I just didn't have the tools to help out.
Right. Exactly. So would you advise, if you're not, if let's say the ideal scenario, if you're not all in the same room at the same time, then everybody should just be on Zoom, and that's that. Like, some people are in the office, some people are not, half and half, but really everyone should be like, forget the hybrid conference room or whatever. Is that what you would advise?
I don't want to say yes, but I don't want to say no.
I asked the hard questions.
Yes is the person that's at home seeing the stupid camera stuff happen, and then you have five people in the chat raising their hand, and then everyone in the room's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But when you're in the room, if everybody is on their laptops and they don't have the room thing on, then you have to figure out, well, who's talking, who's muting, who's whatever. And then there's that scenario happening, which is also difficult.
Yeah.
Which can be very hard. Let's say if you have a very large meeting with a lot of people. So you got to be like, someone has to just take charge. It's like, you will be the person with the mute. You will be the person talking, and go from there.
I think there's an opportunity for some technology improvements, or a whole new thing happening, right?
Yeah.
Like, we need some way, because right now hybrid meetings are not, it's better than it was, but it's, like you said, it's a process, not as good as it could be.
Yeah.
So we're trying to create more inclusive spaces. We have this opportunity to bring more great minds together, people who live in far-flung places, people who have to take care of aging adults or extremely young kids, people who have disabilities, people who have would prefer not to, it stresses them out to be, in a work environment. And so
work environments aren't set up for everybody. That is for sure.
No, not everybody's an extrovert. I've learned that, right? Like, for me, it's like, oh, of course everybody wants to be, doing all these things. It's like, that's not the case. And so in my observation, in this time, when we're thinking about inclusivity, we have this huge opportunity, and I think we need to embrace it as the employees, as in our cultures, right? When we're thinking about how do we actually bake it in, which is something that you've said a few times, into our processes, into our operations, that enable more people to be able to be set up, not just at the table or at the Zoom call, but set up for success in some capacity, right?
Yeah. Like, I would love for that to be the conversation coming in. Whether you're in the recruiting process or you're in the hiring and onboarding process, I want that to be the conversation. Like, what do you need? What tools or work environment, what do you need, Josh?
How do you operate best?
Yeah. What's your operating system? What do you need to be set up for success from day one? How can we help you make that happen? So, like, if that's the conversation, then technically you could, if we're doing it right, if you think of like the work accommodation conversation, that's replacing that. You're now talking about your tools, your ergonomic setup, your lighting environment. Like, I don't know if you can't really tell from like the video that we're on, but I'm like, I work in a dark cave because I get migraines. I can't have these overhead lightings situations at the office. They kill me. That could be part of the conversation that we have together before I even come on board. And you're like, great, we have a whole area of the office where it's a darker setup, and we have these sit-ins desks, and we can get you, all the tools that you need. So if you want to come in, we have that for you. Yeah.
I do feel like we're in a moment, and this conversation has made me kind of realize this. I feel like we're at a moment where we've all now been on the other end of a shitty work environment, like you said, what are you seeing? I mean, you're not, you're not blind, you don't have a, seeing disability. But in that case, you could not see what was happening.
Yeah.
And so now we have so many different types of scenarios and setups and opportunities. We now understand, or at least I feel, I can speak from I feel like I understand, oh, this is what it means to not be in an ideal work environment where everybody's together in the same place. And there's more empathy, and we're expanding the definition of inclusion to include more people, bringing them into that conversation.
Yep. Yeah, there's been so many times, like I look at someone like if you know Kat Holmes, she wrote the book Mismatch, and it is it's many times it's hard for us to actually say, when have I felt included? But it's really easy to say when I have felt excluded. And there's many times at the office, as a woman in tech, as a woman with disability, where I have felt excluded. This space is not for me. This wasn't built for me. And so you have your workarounds to make it work for you. And then everyone's looking at you going, well, why are you wearing a big sun hat and sunglasses? Are you like too cool for school? And you're like,
Yeah.
No, I would like to be able to see today.
Yeah.
I would, why are you laying on the dirty floor? I'm in pain. Can you walk over me or walk somewhere else, please? Or, new mothers,
Totally.
I would like to pump in privacy without anyone bothering me in a very safe and comfortable space.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, it to me, it feels like potentially it could be we're starting to make a little more progress because we have a little more empathy and awareness of what it's like to be excluded in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. I feel like our employees are getting that. I'm not quite sure the higher ups, the executives are quite understanding that.
Okay. All right.
Or maybe it's the shareholders. I'm not quite sure. Somebody is more like, you've had too much power. Come back and do our thing.
Right. Exactly. Well, we're making progress, right? We have at least a little more of that.
Yeah.
Stacey Swinehart Ganderson, thank you so much for your time coming on Great Mondays Radio, sharing your expertise, talking about inclusivity, talking about improving cultures and how teams work. It's really been a pleasure to have you and to talk with you and to cover some new ground. At least for me, I have a little more empathy and acknowledgement and understanding about that. So thank you for teaching me, and I'm excited to share this with my community.
Oh no, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. It was great.
Awesome.